Okay, I would like to welcome our guests for today, a delegation of Iraqi Canadian activists. They are visiting the UN. They met the Canadian ambassador to the UN. And the goal for this visit is to talk and highlight the violations against protesters in Iraq. As we know that Iraq is now in a place where hundreds or thousands of people protesting on regular basis, and we see also a lot of reports about violence and violations perpetrated against people in the streets. And we would like to hear from the gentleman and the lady here about their visit and what they would like to share with us. And I leave it to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for your presence. My name is Ray Seeger. I'm an independent Canadian Iraqi activist living in Toronto, Canada. I have a statement that I'd like to read, so thank you very much for listening. Dear friends, on behalf of my colleagues and I, we would like to thank you for your presence and allowing us the opportunity to echo the cries for help of the Iraqi protesters. As we enter the 5th month of the Iraqi revolution, millions of Iraqis continue to defy all odds against them with the determination to win their country back from the kleptocratic gangs represented by corrupt political parties, radical theological movements, and most importantly, Iranian-backed terrorist militias. Those groups have penetrated their way into the Iraqi political system since 2003, and finally, capitalizing on the political vacuum which has been created as a result of the US troops' withdrawal in 2011. A step which had led to a disaster after the other for the innocent Iraqi people, starting with the evolution of ISIS and ending with the plundering of the Iraqi resources and wealth for the evident benefits and gains of those parties, while the Iraqi people starve for the simplest human rights. I will not share with you the preliminaries of this revolution, as most of you have been very well informed of its details over the past 5 months. However, I will share with you what we, as the freedom-loving people of Iraq, ask of the members of the United Nations and the international community today through your outlets. To date, over 700 Iraqis have been murdered, over 32,000 injured, many of them with life-altering injuries, and over 5,000 unlawful arrests. For one crime and one crime only, they took to the streets with an Iraqi flag in hand and their voices yelling, "We want a nation." The perpetrators have been playing musical chairs and committing those atrocious crimes against the Iraqi people and humanity, be it through the official security forces, militias, or even unleashing criminals to cause chaos and physical damage to the protesters in hopes they would back down. The well-documented use of live ammunition, military-grade tear gas canisters, and shotguns, all aimed to kill with a distance of less than 50 meters, seems to be an awfully heavy price to pay for a nation that is only demanding its basic human rights. Outside of those squares, militias groups have taken it upon themselves to shut down media outlets who report the truth, assassinating journalists, doctors, poets, artists, activists, and even the children of those who speak up against those crimes. Others have received written murder threats to stop supporting the revolution or speaking out against those actions. These are also very well documented. The weapon of choice for the protesters have been peace, art, love, music, and progressive values. These weapons have been extremely effective against the corrupt and criminal actions of those in power. Why, you may ask? Because it is a language they do not understand. However, it is time for the world to step in and take serious actions against the government and political elites who have proven over past 16 years their inability and undisputed lack of intent to rebuild Iraq, as the people of that country and those who have sacrificed to be rid of the tyranny of Saddam Hussein truly deserve. Today, Iraq is an unconstitutional chaos, with an incompetent government that could potentially lead to a power vacuum to result in the threat of militias and causing regional instability, once again, as the case was with ISIS in 2014. We ask the United Nations and all of the free world to escalate the Iraqi people's cause from condemning and expressing concerns to using all the legal tools available and the power of the Security Council resolutions to achieve the following. Number one, the immediate protection of the peaceful protesters movement and allowing them to formulate a common electoral front in preparation to enter an early election, which has been one of the main demands of these protesters. Number two, promotion of an interim government that is independent of the will of the current corrupt system and chosen with the approval of the people, not forced upon them, as it is the case today with the current interim government. Number three, the UN must play an active role in supervising and monitoring the early elections to ensure that it is free of corruption. Number four, the UN is to lead and supervise the investigation and bring in justice through international courts to those who have committed the crimes against humanity and protesters, since the local government has failed to do so. Number five, the UN is to work with the international community to apply Magnitsky sanctions against corrupt officials, militia leaders, and businessmen who have plundered Iraq of its resources for the past 16 years and returned the wealth to the people of Iraq. Number six, the UN Security Council must work on a resolution that officially condemns the continuous interference of the Iranian regime, or be it any other regime, in the fate of Iraq and its people through its proxies and backed militias. These are our demands. This is our voice. The action is yours to take, and the time is now. Thank you very much. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. I should also say that Mrs. Amal Habib can answer your questions in French, and Mr. Munir Al-Ward can answer your questions in Arabic. It's good to know your position now from your statement. I think the statements in French and in Arabic are very much similar to what you just said in English. So I would start with a question about how do you see the UN work during this crisis in Iraq? We see that the UN representative in Iraq, Mrs. Blaskhart, is pretty active. We follow her statements. But for you as an Iraqi citizen, do you believe that this is enough? Do you expect more from the UN when it comes to monitoring the situation and reporting on the situation?
Thank you for your question. I believe that we are nowhere near enough with what's been expressed. So far, the UNAMI mission to Iraq has expressed a lot of concerns, have called upon the government to take action, but it has not resulted in any success. We fear that the UNAMI mission may not be talking to the right people inside on the grounds there. We give you a life example. The day that the UNAMI mission was inside Tahrir Square, for example, the political parties have penetrated Tahrir Square and have given orders to keep the security forces from using violence for the duration of that. But as soon as the UNAMI mission left, things changed, and the use of live ammunition. Ms. Janine Blaskhart has seen this firsthand during her visit to Al-Kindi Hospital, where she saw how there were a lot of patients with tear gas canisters penetrating their heads, causing deformalities, causing life-altering injuries, if it didn't cause their lives. So we think that there is no sense of urgency on the UNAMI's part, and we'd really like them to escalate, to use all the legal powers of the United Nations to affect the situation there while respecting Iraq's sovereignty.
Before I give the floor to my colleagues, I would like to ask Mrs. Amal Habib, the UN will have a huge event in 10 days from now. It's about the Women's Committee. And women's issues will be discussed thoroughly here in this building for 2 weeks. Do you have a message about women in Iraq during this crisis? How women are treated in the streets, in the protests in the streets? What can you tell us about the violence against women during these protests in Iraq?
Merci. Et aussi, plus tôt sera le jour de femmes dans tout le monde, en Irak aussi, mais malheureusement en Irak, la femme elle est toujours torturée. Et aussi, ils ont capturé, ils ont torturé, ils ont aussi violé la femme. La femme, elles sont violées dans des places cachées quelque part. Et elle détruit la personnalité, le physique de femme. Et après ça, elle les envoie comme ça. Et elle se dit, OK, vous allez dire, oh, ça y est, je ne vais jamais faire de démonstration, vous allez rester à la maison. Alors, c'est ça, c'est comme ça. Sinon, ils vont vers les enfants des femmes. Les enfants, ils les torturent, ils les kidnappent et les coupent en morceaux. Et l'envoient aux parents comme ça. Alors, la femme, elle n'est jamais libre en Irak. Jusqu'à maintenant, il y a beaucoup de travail doit être fait sur la liberté de femmes, pour la voix des femmes en Irak, qu'elles soient entendues, malheureusement.
Thank you. The floor is open if you have any question.
Yes.
Oui.
I am sorry I came in a bit late. I'll have to read your statement afterward. Can you comment upon the foreign intervention in your country and the part that the United Nations has played in, well, I was present in 1990 to 1991 when the Security Council passed Resolution 678, which, according to former Attorney General Ramsey Clark, led to the destruction of the infrastructure necessary to support human life in Iraq. And then later on, when it was demonstrated that under false pretenses, President Bush attacked your country, and when, I'm sorry to say, Madeleine Albright was asked what she thought about 500,000 Iraqi children dying as a result of the United Nations sanctions, and she said we consider that a price worth paying for democracy. Of course, that's pretty scandalous, I think. But it looks as though Dennis Halliday resigned because he said he did not want to be forced by the Security Council.
Carla,
my question is, you're asking for the UN to intervene, but it appears as though UN intervention in the past has not helped and, if anything, has been devastating to your country. Can you comment upon foreign intervention and United Nations intervention, which has led up to what appears now to be a very tragic situation?
Thank you.
Perhaps you could do it all yourself.
Thank you very much for your question. You are absolutely right. Foreign intervention has never served in Iraq's history or any other nation's history, for that matter. However, where we are today, as a result of the president that you've shared with us, we are in a complete destruction of infrastructure, sociological values. We're in an unconstitutional chaos currently, and our people have taken to the streets and saying that we will do this peacefully. We do not want war anymore. However, it's very difficult to make the change yourself and take that step if the other party is using all kinds of prohibited violence and brutal measures against those people that are on the streets. This new generation that's taken to the streets has surprised 99% of Iraqis themselves, because these values that they've represented are extremely progressive. They are denouncing all sectarian rhetoric that's taken over. And they are calling for these corrupt political parties to be taken out or to be stepping down. Now, we know that for the past 16 years, since the 2003 US-led invasion, the infrastructure has not been rebuilt. The constitution has not really been of serving the people. The political parties have used it when it made sense, and when it didn't, they just threw it to the side. But in my question to you, and I send it back to you, is where do the Iraqi people go? Unless we have another Syria, which nobody wants, where the people pick up arms, and nobody wants to get to that point. And we just came out of it in 2014 with the fight with ISIS. So, you know, this loop that keeps happening, you know, we look to the international community for this intervention. Iraqis do not want money. Iraqis do not want weapons. What Iraqis want is a monitoring eye on the government and these militias and the political parties to be held back from killing them so they can make the change that they need to make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Benny?
Yes, sir.
You say that that the demonstrators are, you know, opposed sectarianism. How realistic is that in the context of Iraq, which has been divided on sectarial divisions for such a long time, and can that Humpty Dumpty be put back together?
So I can tell you that there is this notion of Iraq has been a sectarian place for a very long time. It is not the case. This has started in 2003. I, for one, come from a very, very small minority, and I left Iraq in 1996. But I never knew who of my friends were of this sect or that sect, for example. This all came about after 2003, where you had political parties that have been playing the role of the opposition outside beyond the borders prior to that invasion, and have come in with agendas from outside of the borders to divide Iraq the way they. And the other thing is, we cannot deny the role of Paul Bremer's constitution that has divided the country into 3 different sects. So, you know, you can't ignore that and the role it has played. So the statement, personally as an Iraqi, and I'm sure my friends and colleagues share it with me, share the same notion with me, as Iraqis, we know that we did not have this sectarianism before. And that's what this new generation that has grown up with ISIS, from the American invasion to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, to the sectarian war, they're saying enough is enough. We want life, we want to live.
Let me just follow up on this. It is true that before 2003 there was no sectarianism, but I mean, there was a Shiite uprising against Saddam.
Yes.
There was a Kurd uprising against Saddam, and it was put down. So basically, the sectarianism was buried under dictatorial boot.
These revolutions you speak of, and they so are, were not a revolution for Shiites or Kurds. They were revolutions against Saddam's and the Ba'athist regime. That's what they were. They were not because, you know, I'm a Shia, I'm going to uprise against the Iraqi government. It was against Saddam's brutal measures and his you know, atrocities against the people. Both, whether be it the Shiites in the south or the Kurds in the north, they've suffered a lot under Saddam's regime. So it wasn't because I'm Kurd or I'm a Shia, I want to uprise against, and I want a rule that is for Shias only. It was, I need to stop Saddam from his tyranny. That's what it was.
I have a question in Arabic, أستاذ منير. طبعا موضوع المحاسبة هو جزء أساسي من زيارتكم إلى الأمم المتحدة. هل يمكن أن تخبرنا عن تصوركم لآلية معينة لإجراء محاسبة على الانتهاكات التي شهدها العراق خلال الأشهر الثلاثة الأخيرة؟
شكرا جزيلا. الحقيقة احنا يعني تكلمنا صباح هذا اليوم، التقينا مع السفير الكندي في الأمم المتحدة، وجرى حديث عن مطالبنا اللي هي مطالب المتظاهرين بالأساس، وكانت واحد من النقاط اللي تم مناقشتها هو دور الأمم المتحدة في البدء والشروع بشكل جدي بمحاسبة قتلة المتظاهرين. يعني أنا بس أحب أشير إلى استطلاع للرأي قامت به واحدة من المؤسسات المعروفة عالميا، واللي أشارت أنه حوالي 85% من طبعا العينة كانت من 2000 مواطن عراقي من مختلف الشرائح الاجتماعية والديموغرافية والاقتصادية والأعمار، وحتى من كل المحافظات العراقية. الحقيقة هذا الاستطلاع جاب نتائج يعني ملفتة للانتباه، وهي أنه 85% من اللي جرى استطلاع رأيهم هم مؤيدين للمظاهرات، والنسبة قد تصل إلى 80% حتى في محافظات إقليم كردستان. هذا يعني أنه أنا أأكد على كلام زميلي ريد، هو أنه موضوع الطائفية هو مو هو العامل الأساسي في الآن في الساحة في العراق. صح الأطراف تدفع، الأطراف السياسية والسلطة والميليشيات تدفع بهذا الاتجاه، لكن المنتفضين والشباب في ساحات التظاهر ما يدفعهم أي دافع طائفي. الشيء الآخر اللي هو جواب على السؤال، يمكن يكون جواب على سؤال المحاسبة قتلة المتظاهرين والمتسببين في كل هذا العنف المفرط. الدراسة هذه أيضا جاءت بأنه أكو مطلبين أساسيين اللي كان حصلوا على أعلى تأييد من قبل اللي استطلعت آرائهم. المطلب الأول هو محاسبة القتلة المتظاهرين والمتسببين بالعنف، والمطلب الثاني هو إجراءات انتخابات مبكرة وبإشراف مباشر من الأمم المتحدة. فالحقيقة احنا يعني نعمل على هذا الاتجاه، واكو اتصالات مع مجاميع ناشطة أخرى في أوروبا وإنجلترا وفي أمريكا وفي دول أخرى اللي أن نشتغل على هاي الملفات، وإحنا نطلب من الأمم المتحدة وهيئاتها أن تساعدنا في هذا الاتجاه، وأن تدفع باتجاه عرض هذه الملفات وجلب المتسببين في قتل المتظاهرين إلى محكمة الجنايات الدولية ومحاسبتهم. هذا واحد من المطالب الأساسية اللي احنا جينا بها، واللي هي يطالب بها الآن الشباب المنتفض في العراق.
So I can maybe repeat the same question in English, Mr. Saiger. It was about accountability. Mr. Samir said that Iraq should be referred to the ICC. Can you explain more what mechanism you are calling for in Iraq?
So we understand the challenges with referring Iraq to the ICC directly. Sorry. We understand the legal challenges around referring Iraq to the ICC, with Iraq not being under the jurisdiction of ICC currently because of the Constitution. However, what we're calling upon is applying Magnitsky sanctions through our respective governments, be it, the Canadian activists or the Canadian Iraqi activists are calling for these Magnitsky sanctions through the Canadian government. Same thing happening in the U.S. And we saw a list that we've actually had some track record with the U.S. releasing names of these militia leaders. Now, this is one avenue that we'd like to take. Another avenue, we know that there are a lot of efforts into taking it directly, taking it before the courts directly. And we also know that it could be taken through a UN resolution. So perhaps the most suitable avenue is through a UN or Security Council resolution to refer this to the ICC.
My last question, Canada is running for a seat in the Security Council. Did the Canadian ambassador promise to take any measure regarding accountability should Canada wins the seat in the Security Council?
No promises were made, but it was a very pleasant meeting. The Ambassador Blanchard, was kind enough to share with us a few pointers on how to deal with this situation through the UN. Of course, as activists, we're not really of law background or anything like that. So, he did express willingness to have an open dialogue with friends and allies. But as far as promises goes, I think it's too early until let Canada make it through the election first, and then we can have that conversation. He was definitely welcoming in that regard. So we really appreciate to be honest with you, it's not only Ambassador Blanchard. Our Canadian ambassador in Iraq has been playing a beautiful, wonderful role there, and the guy is fairly new. Even our Canadian government has released a number of statements to that, but we know that they're trying to work with friends and allies as much as they can to help the Iraqi people, and we really appreciate that. We understand it may take some time.
No more questions. Thank you so much for... Okay.
This may not be a popular question, but I understand that when Saddam Hussein was there, you did have free education and free health care. And I know a friend of mine from Iraq getting a PhD in organic chemistry at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, which very few men can do. She practically had a breakdown when Resolution 678 ended in the destruction of your country, pretty much. I'm really thrilled to see that there are several Iraqis still alive really, I don't mean to be sarcastic. But I do understand that there was free education and free health care, which does set a basis for an educated population. Can you comment upon that? And also the same was the situation in Libya. They got rid of Gaddafi. Well, that was thanks to the UN involvement. And so it looks as though the countries which are supporting healthcare free and education free are the ones being destroyed. And my country, well, I'm American, has a wonderful relationship with a country notorious for repressing women, and without mentioning the name, you know what I'm referring to. So there does seem to be a trend to try and destroy countries which emphasize basic human rights, free education and free health care. Can you say something about that? I know you mentioned...
Thanks, Carla.
Yeah.
Okay, it's clear. Thank you.
I can comment on Iraq. I can't comment on Libya because I'm not very familiar with the situation there. But as far as Iraq goes today, yes, it's true that we did have free education. We had free healthcare. We had many other free things. But under Saddam's regime, there were many other rights that were oppressed that people could not speak of as well. So leading to today, believe it or not, it is still the same hospitals that Saddam built in a much worse shape. There is still the same schools. I can tell you about the situation in those two sectors today. We have today, just last week, we had exams, midterm exams. And these children, and we have photos, are sitting there writing exams with water to their knee heights. And they're sitting in that environment. We're talking about 7, 8-year-olds. And they're in mud schools, in schools without electricity, and they look almost like tombs. As far as hospitals go and healthcare, it's the photos are self-explanatory. There is infectious environments everywhere inside hospitals. The way the Iraqi government has dealt with the threat of coronavirus coming from Iran last week has been absolutely ridiculous, where they keep denying that there are cases. They refuse to close off the borders, and there are still flights going from Iraq to Iran and vice versa. If people are not really being thoroughly tested, and now Iraq is not a country that can receive or take on such a challenge. We're expecting, hopefully it doesn't happen, but should that spread, we're going to run into much bigger problems in that country. We are nowhere near ready. So neither education, a political elite has paid no attention to education for the past 16 years, and it's programmed to lead people towards the militia groups, to lead people to go towards the theological ideologies, and so there is a systematic thing that's happening there in both regards. I don't know if that answers your question.
Toby?
Thank you, and thanks very much for coming to speak with us. Could you just give a little bit of an assessment of the security situation? I know that's not your field, but there was, after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, there were protests, and then a resolution or a piece of legislation, I believe, that called for the expulsion of U.S. troops. As a result of that, I don't think that the U.S. has honored that desire at all. But what does the security situation look like on the ground, and do you see it deteriorating or improving? Thank you.
So, as far as the resolution you've alluded to goes, this was a charade, a parliamentary charade, where there was not enough members present to make such a resolution. That's number one. Number two, the members of parliaments that participated in that belonged to certain militia groups, and they called for it. But as far as the security situation goes, it is deteriorating. We are heading, if we take the definition of a genocide, we are heading towards a genocide in Iraq against the civilian population. So, be it through direct brutality measures or through silent assassinations outside of these protesters. So we, in terms as far as security goes, to be honest with you, we would not be here desperate for help if it was getting better. The interim government that's being put in place, we don't see any representation of what the Iraqi people have been calling for, especially the cabinet was released today. And
do you see a sovereign security improvement?
with the current situation?
Yeah, with the interim government.
No, not at all. Not at all. They represent the will of the militias. The current Alawi, which is the designate, he was nominated by Muqtada al-Sadr and Hadi al-Amri. So both are militia group leaders. And they played it off as these are what the protesters are calling for. And any protester inside the square saying anything against that are getting stabbed in their sleep or they're getting their throat cut. Yes, sir.
Just speaking of those militias, Muqtada Sadr and all those, how realistic is to think that that Iraq could get to a situation where there's one gun, one government, as opposed to, these militias are very strong.
My dear sir, Iraq is 7,000 years old. So we've seen good days, we've seen bad days. The people of Iraq have proven years over years and generation after generation how they've come back from oppression. The 70s and the 60s are, even the 80s during the Iraq-Iran war, are a clear indication of that. Before 2003, there were no militias. There were no militias. And nobody could speak of militias except for the Peshmerga, but Peshmerga is under the organized forces. So, but other than that, I think it's very possible with the rule of law, when we have a proper constitution that is being respected and implemented, and we have the aid of friends and allies to build our security forces, the Iraqis really historically never backed down from a fight to take their country back, just like they did with ISIS. So I think it is possible. It is very, very possible, but with the help of friends and free love, the freedom-loving nations around the world.